long before Japan became a country of quiet mountain villages, ancient shrines, towering cedar forests, and fields of cherry blossoms, before fishermen sailed across calm bays, before monks climbed mist-covered mountains, before emperors ruled from great capitals. The oldest stories tell us that Japan did not yet exist. There were no islands stretching across the Pacific Ocean, no Mount Fuji rising above the clouds, no bamboo forests whispering in the wind, no rivers winding through peaceful valleys, no temples where lanterns glowed softly beneath cedar trees. The familiar landscape that millions of people know today had not yet taken its first breath. Instead, there was only an endless world that had not quite decided what it wished to become. The people who first shared these stories imagined the beginning of everything very differently from many other cultures. There was no sudden explosion, no great war among the heavens, no single dramatic moment when light defeated darkness. Creation, according to the oldest Japanese myths, arrived quietly, patiently, like morning mist slowly lifting from a valley, or the first rays of sunlight gradually reaching the top of a distant mountain. It was a beginning without urgency. The ancient Japanese believed that before the world settled into the shape we recognize today, heaven and earth existed together in a strange, unfinished state. Everything floated. Nothing had yet found its proper place. The sky had not fully risen above. The land had not fully gathered below. The sea had no shores. The mountains had no peaks. The forests had no trees. Even time itself seemed slower, as though the universe had only just awakened and was still deciding what kind of place it wished to become. The oldest surviving Japanese chronicles, the asterisk Kajiki asterisk and later the asterisk Nihon Shoki asterisk, describe this distant age using remarkably simple language. Rather than trying to explain every detail, they leave much to the imagination. Perhaps that is one reason these stories have survived for so many centuries. They invite the listener to imagine the silence for themselves. Imagine standing in a place where there is no wind, no birds, no flowing rivers, no footsteps, no voices, only an endless horizon stretching in every direction. The sea below is perfectly still, not because it is frozen, but because there is nothing yet to disturb it. No moon pulls upon its tides, no storms gather above its waters. It simply rests beneath the pale sky that has not yet chosen its color. There is something strangely comforting about this image. Modern life is rarely quiet. Cities hum through the night. Roads remain busy long after sunset. Even moments of rest are often interrupted by distant sounds. Yet the earliest Japanese storytellers imagine the beginning of the world as almost completely silent, not lonely, simply peaceful. The silence was not something to fear. It was simply waiting. Waiting for mountains, waiting for rivers, waiting for forests, waiting for people. The world itself seemed to understand that beautiful things are worth waiting for. As the ancient stories continue, something begins to change, not suddenly, almost imperceptibly, from the quiet heavens above. The first divine beings begin to appear. These were the earliest asterisk kami asterisk. Today, the word asterisk kami asterisk is often translated into English as gods or spirits, yet neither translation fully captures its meaning. A asterisk kami asterisk is not always a ruler, nor is it simply a ghost. Instead, the word describes sacred beings connected to nature, life, and the unseen forces that quietly shape the world. A mountain could possess its own asterisk kami asterisk, a waterfall, a great cedar tree. Even the wind moving gently through a forest might be understood as carrying something sacred. This way of seeing the world would later become the foundation of Shinto, Japan's oldest spiritual tradition. Rather than separating nature from the divine, the ancient Japanese often saw the two as inseparable. The sacred lived within the natural world itself. Looking back, it is easy to understand why. Anyone who has stood beneath an ancient cedar several thousand years old or watched morning fog drift slowly across a mountain lake or listened to rain falling softly upon a temple roof may understand why people believed that something greater quietly lived within these places. The earliest Kami asterisk, however, were different. They did not yet rule mountains or forests, after all neither mountains nor forests had been created. Instead, they appeared one after another within the heavens, each generation bringing the unfinished universe a little closer to becoming complete. Interestingly, many of these earliest divine beings rarely appear again in later myths. They do not fight, they do not argue, they do not perform great miracles. They simply emerge, exist, and quietly pass the responsibility onward to those who come after them. It is almost as though the oldest storytellers wish to remind us that not every important figure needs to stand at the center of history. Some simply prepare the way for others. Generation followed generation. The heavens slowly filled. The world below remained patient. Then, after many divine generations had quietly passed, two names finally entered the story that would be remembered across more than 1,000 years of Japanese history: Izanagi and Izanami. To this day, these two names remain among the most important in all of Japanese mythology. They are often called the creators of Japan. Yet when they first appear in the ancient stories, they are not introduced as mighty rulers or powerful conquerors. They are simply given a responsibility. The heavens look down upon the unfinished world below. The sea still stretches endlessly without islands, without shores, without mountains rising above the waves. The universe has become beautiful, but it is still incomplete. And so the elder Kami can trust Izanagi and Izanami with a task unlike any that had come before. They are asked to give shape to the world. Before beginning their work, the two deities stand upon a remarkable place known as the Floating Bridge of Heaven. The name itself feels wonderfully dreamlike. Not a bridge built from wood or stone, not suspended by ropes or pillars. Simply a bridge connecting heaven with the endless sea below. The ancient texts never describe it in great detail, perhaps intentionally. Some imagine clouds forming its surface. Others imagine light. Still others picture something beyond human understanding altogether. Whatever its true appearance may have been within the imagination of those early storytellers, it became one of the oldest stages in Japanese mythology. From there, looking down upon the silent waters below, Izanagi and Izanami receive one final gift: a magnificent spear, known as ****, the heavenly jeweled spear. Unlike the spears carried by warriors throughout later Japanese history, this one was never created for battle. It would never defend a kingdom, never conquer an enemy, never spill blood. Instead, it existed for creation. Its polished shaft shimmered with heavenly beauty. Its jeweled blade reflected the quiet light of the heavens. One can almost imagine it glowing softly above the endless sea. The two deities held the spear together. Then very gently they lowered its tip toward the waters below. There was no violence, no thunder, no great command shouted across the heavens. Only a slow, patient, almost graceful movement. The spear entered the ancient sea, and with careful hands they stirred the endless waters. Round and round, slowly, the ocean responded with gentle circles spreading endlessly across its quiet surface. Nothing hurried, nothing resisted. It was less like creating the world and more like waking it from a very long sleep. When they finally lifted the spear once again, tiny droplets of seawater clung to its jeweled tip. For a brief moment they sparkled beneath the light of heaven. Then one by one the droplets fell back into the endless ocean below. According to one of Japan's oldest surviving stories, those simple falling drops became the first island. Not through destruction, not through fire, not through war, but through something wonderfully gentle. A few drops of water falling quietly from a jeweled spear. The island that emerged was called ****Ngoro****. It became the first piece of solid land in a world that had known only endless sea. One island, standing peacefully beneath an open sky, waiting much like the universe itself had waited for everything that would come next. The forests had not yet grown. The mountains had not yet risen. The rivers had not yet begun their long journeys to the sea. But for the first time the world had somewhere to begin. And with that single island rising gently from the ancient waters, the long story. For a little while the first island stood alone. On every side the endless sea stretched toward a horizon that had no end. There were still no chains of islands reaching across the ocean, no quiet villages hidden among mountain valleys, no fishermen watching the morning tide, no deer wandering through ancient forests. Even the winds had not yet learned how to travel across the world. Only Anagora remained, the first land, rising gently above waters that had known nothing but silence for countless ages. To the people who first shared these stories, the appearance of this island marked something far greater than the creation of land. It represented the beginning of order. Until now the universe had been unfinished, beautiful yet incomplete. Now for the first time there was somewhere life could begin, somewhere mountains might one day rise, somewhere rivers could eventually find their paths to the sea, somewhere forests could patiently grow for thousands of years before people ever walked beneath them. It is a remarkably gentle image. The world does not appear all at once. It grows, just as a tiny sapling eventually becomes an enormous cedar tree, or a narrow stream slowly becomes a wide river. Creation itself unfolds one quiet step at a time. The ancient storyteller seemed to understand something many people today easily forget. The greatest things rarely happen in an instant. They arrive slowly, patiently, almost without being noticed. Standing upon the floating bridge of heaven, Izanagi and Izanami looked upon the island they had helped create. The endless sea no longer felt quite so endless. The silence no longer felt empty. Instead, it felt full of possibility. According to the old stories, the two descended from the heavens onto this newly formed land. Imagine what that first journey might have felt like. There were no paths waiting beneath their feet. No trees offered shade. No birds welcomed them with morning songs. The ground itself had only just emerged from the sea. Every direction held complete mystery. Every step became the first step anyone had ever taken. The island itself was said to possess extraordinary beauty, not because flowers already covered its hills, not because forests stretched across its valleys, but because it represented something entirely new: hope. For the first time the universe had a beginning. The two divine beings did not immediately begin creating more land. Instead, they prepared. One of the most fascinating parts of Japanese mythology is how often important moments begin with quiet rituals rather than dramatic action. Before building the world, before creating countless islands, before giving birth to many of the kami, Izanagi and Izanami first established a place where heaven and earth could meet. At the center of Anagora they raised a great pillar, known in the ancient texts as the Heavenly Pillar. The stories tell us very little about its appearance. Some later artists imagined polished wood reaching toward the heavens. Others pictured shining stone. Some believed it resembled an enormous sacred tree connecting sky and earth. Perhaps no single image is correct. Perhaps every generation imagined it differently. What mattered was not the material from which it was built. What mattered was its meaning. It became the center of the new world, a place where order replaced emptiness. Even today, many cultures build sacred places around a central point: a great temple, an ancient tree, a towering mountain. Perhaps these traditions reach back to something deeply human, the desire to create one place that reminds us where we belong. Once the Heavenly Pillar stood upon the island, Izanagi and Izanami prepared to perform one of the oldest ceremonies in Japanese mythology. They agreed to walk around the pillar. One would travel clockwise, the other counterclockwise. Only after completing their journey would they meet again. The image feels almost peaceful. No armies, no thunder. Only two figures walking slowly around a single pillar beneath an endless sky. Eventually they reached one another. According to the oldest version of the story, Izanami spoke first. She admired her companion with warm words. For a brief moment everything seemed perfect, yet something unexpected happened. The ancient stories tell us that the ceremony had not been performed correctly. Later generations offered different explanations. Some believed the order of greeting had been important. Others saw symbolic meanings hidden within the tale. Whatever the reason, the first attempt did not bring harmony. Instead, the children born from this union were unable to live as intended. It is one of the quietest tragedies in Japanese mythology. Not a battle, not a punishment, simply something unfinished, something that had not yet found its proper place. Rather than continuing despite their mistake, Izanagi and Izanami returned to the heavenly Kalmi. They asked what had gone wrong. There is something surprisingly comforting about this part of the story. Even the creators of the world were allowed to make mistakes. Even divine beings sometimes needed guidance. The elder Komi explained the proper way to perform the ceremony, and so the two returned once more to the heavenly pillar. Again they began walking, one in each direction. The island remained silent around them. The sea stretched endlessly toward every horizon. The sky watched quietly above. Once more they met. This time the ceremony was completed in harmony. From that moment the world truly began to grow. The ancient stories tell us that one island became many. The great islands that would one day form Japan slowly emerged from the sea, one after another. Awaji, Shikoku, Kyushu, Honshu. Many of the names familiar today began appearing within these ancient tales. It is remarkable to think that for more than 1,000 years people have listened to these same names while imagining the birth of their homeland. Yet the islands themselves were only the beginning. As the land expanded, the world slowly filled with life. The kami began appearing, not all at once. Just as creation itself had unfolded patiently, so too did the sacred spirits of nature. The mountains received their kami, the rivers received theirs, the forests, the valleys, the wind, the rain, the sea, even fire itself. To modern ears it may seem unusual to imagine every part of nature possessing its own sacred presence. Yet for those who first told these stories, the idea likely felt completely natural. Imagine standing alone within an ancient cedar forest, trees that have watched 1,000 winters, sunlight barely reaching the moss below, the air carrying the scent of earth after rain. It becomes much easier to understand why someone might quietly believe they were not entirely alone. Shinto would eventually grow around this beautiful way of seeing the world, not as a religion centered upon distant heavens, but as one that gently reminded people to notice the sacred already surrounding them. A waterfall was not merely water. A mountain was not merely stone. A forest was not simply wood. Each possessed its own quiet spirit, its own dignity, its own place within creation. Perhaps that is one reason Japanese gardens, temples, and forests still carry such remarkable peace today. For centuries, people approached these places not as owners, but as respectful guests. As Onagora watched the world slowly expand around it, the first island was no longer alone. The endless sea now embraced many lands. The heavens reflected upon growing rivers. The first mountains reached toward passing clouds. The world that had once waited in silence had finally begun breathing. And among all the kami now quietly filling creation, one remained yet to be born. A goddess whose light would eventually become so important that every sunrise across Japan would forever remind people of her name. As the islands continued rising from the ancient sea, their world slowly began to resemble something familiar. There was still no Japan as we know it today. No great cities, no castles overlooking quiet valleys, no lanterns glowing beneath temple roofs, no winding mountain roads disappearing into cedar forests. Yet the foundations had been laid. The land existed. The sea surrounded it. The heavens watched peacefully above. Now, according to the ancient stories, the world itself began receiving its many guardians. The birth of the kami did not happen in a single moment. Just as forests grow one tree at a time, the sacred slowly spread across creation. The oldest myths tell us that Izanagi and Izanami became the parents of many divine beings. Each birth added another quiet piece to the unfinished world. One became the spirit of flowing rivers, another watched over fertile valleys. Some came to dwell within mountains, others within forests. They were calmly connected to the wind that crossed open fields, calmly who quietly watched over the sea, calmly whose presence could be felt in waterfalls cascading through deep mountain ravines. To people living thousands of years ago, this way of understanding the world made perfect sense. Every place seemed alive, not alive in the way people are, but alive with presence, with dignity, with something worthy of respect. Imagine standing beside an enormous cedar tree, its trunk wider than several people standing together, its highest branches disappearing into morning mist. It has survived storms older than entire kingdoms. Countless generations have rested beneath its shade. Birds have nested among its branches every spring. Rain has polished its roots for centuries. Looking upon such a tree, it becomes easier to understand why someone might quietly believe surely something sacred lives here. The same feeling can arrive beside waterfalls, especially those hidden deep within the Japanese mountains. The water has flowed without interruption for thousands of years, long before villages appeared, long before roads crossed the valleys, long before anyone gave the waterfall a name. It simply continued flowing, patiently, without asking for recognition. The ancient Japanese often believed such places possessed their own kami, not because they wished to explain nature, but because they wished to honor it. Respect came before ownership. Gratitude came before control. It is a quiet philosophy, one that would shape Japanese culture for many centuries. Even today, visitors to old Shinto shrines sometimes notice enormous sacred trees wrapped with thick ropes made from twisted rice straw, known as **shima or ***. These ropes quietly announce that the tree is not ordinary. It is respected, not because someone planted it, but because something sacred is believed to dwell within it. The custom reaches back through countless generations, perhaps even to stories like these. As more kami entered the world, the land itself slowly became richer. The mountains were no longer simply mountains. Each possessed its own quiet identity. The rivers no longer wandered alone toward the sea. Each carried its own unseen guardian. The forests became homes to countless invisible presences. The sea itself, endless and mysterious, was never considered empty. Even the gentle breeze moving through bamboo groves might be understood as carrying something beyond ordinary sight. Modern readers sometimes ask, did people truly believe every rock or river contained spirit? The answer is more subtle than a simple yes or no. Rather than imagining every object as magical, many people simply believed that nature deserved the same respect one offers another living being. A mountain should not be approached carelessly. A forest should not be entered with arrogance. A river should not be taken for granted. These beliefs encouraged humility, and perhaps that is one reason they survived. The world became something people lived alongside rather than something they merely possessed. As Izanagi and Izanami continued their work, the heavens watched quietly above. Their task had never been to rule creation forever. Their task was to begin it, like gardeners planting the very first seeds, knowing they would never see every tree that one day grew from them. Many myths from around the world celebrate power, great battles, victorious heroes, magnificent kingdoms. Japanese mythology often pauses instead to admire beginnings. A single island, a flowing river, a growing forest, a quiet mountain. Perhaps these stories reflected the landscape itself. Japan has always been a country where nature quietly surrounds everyday life. Mountains cover much of the land. Forests stretch across distant hills. Rivers weave between valleys before reaching the sea. Living among such places naturally shapes the stories people tell. The myths became mirrors of the landscape, or perhaps the landscape became a mirror of the myths. No one can truly say. As the divine family continued growing, one birth followed another. The spirit of trees, the spirit of fields, the spirit of mist, the spirit of harvest, the spirit of valleys. Each quietly found its place within the expanding world. Nothing appeared unnecessary. Nothing existed without purpose. Every hill, every stream, every stone resting beside a woodland path could become part of something much larger than itself. There is something wonderfully calming about this way of seeing the world. Imagine taking a peaceful walk through an old Japanese forest. Instead of rushing toward your destination, you notice each small detail. Sunlight dancing upon moss, the sound of distant water, the fragrance of cedar after rain, birdsong echoing gently through the trees. The myths quietly encourage this kind of attention, not because they demand belief, but because they invite appreciation. They remind us the world becomes richer when we truly notice it. For time creation continued peacefully. The islands multiplied, the Kami found their homes. The heavens seemed content. The earth slowly settled into harmony. It might almost seem as though the work had been completed. Yet the oldest stories rarely remain peaceful forever. Just as every season eventually changes, so too would creation. Among all the Kami yet to be born, one remained unlike the others, a spirit whose arrival would bring both warmth and sorrow. Its name was Kagutsuchi, the Kami of fire, and with its birth a gentle beginning of Japan's oldest creation story would quietly give way to its first great tragedy. Calm above. One by one, the Kami had found their places within creation. The world felt complete, or at least as complete as something so young could ever become. It is easy, when listening to ancient myths, to imagine that creation simply continued forever without difficulty. Yet the people who first shared these stories understood something about life that remains true today. Even the most peaceful beginnings eventually meet sorrow, not because the world is cruel, but because change is woven into every part of existence. The story that follows is perhaps one of the oldest reminders of this idea. Among the many children born to Izanagi and Izanami, one would become unlike all the others. Its name was Kagutsuchi***, the Kami of fire. Fire is one of the most fascinating forces in nature. It warms homes during winter. It cooks food. It provides light against the darkness of night. Without it, civilizations could never have grown as they did. Yet the same fire that comforts us can also destroy forests, consume villages, and reshape entire landscapes. Even today, people living near volcanoes understand this quiet balance. The earth gives. The earth also takes away. Japan, resting upon the meeting place of great tectonic plates, has always known both sides of fire. Volcanoes rise throughout the islands. Some sleep peacefully beneath snow-covered peaks. Others occasionally remind the world that deep beneath the surface the earth is still alive. Long before geology could explain these forces, the ancient Japanese told stories instead. Stories helped people understand why the land itself seemed capable of both extraordinary beauty and sudden destruction. Kagutsuchi became one of those stories. The birth of the fire Kami was unlike every birth before it. Until this moment, creation had unfolded gently. Islands appeared, forests grew, mountains rose. The world expanded with quiet patience. Then fire entered creation. The oldest versions of the myth tell us that the flames surrounding Kagutsuchi were so powerful, so intense, that they fatally injured Izanami during childbirth. It is one of the most heartbreaking moments in all of Japanese mythology, not because it is described dramatically, but because it is told with remarkable simplicity. The mother who had helped create the islands, who had given life to countless Kami, could no longer remain among them. As she weakened, even more Kami were said to emerge from her suffering. Spirits connected to mountains claim at water and healing. It is a recurring idea throughout many ancient cultures that even sorrow may become the beginning of something new. The world continued growing even through grief. For Izanagi, the loss was almost beyond understanding. Together, he and Izanami had stood upon the floating bridge of heaven. Together they had stirred the endless sea. Together they had watched the first island rise from the waters. Now, for the first time since creation had begun, he stood alone. The old stories tell us that Izanagi's grief became overwhelming. Some versions describe him weeping. Others simply speak of profound sadness. From his tears, new Kami was said to appear. Even sorrow within these ancient myths possessed the power to create. There is something deeply human about this idea. The storytellers could easily have described grief as meaningless suffering. Instead, they imagined that terrors themselves carried life, that even the quiet sadness of losing someone loved became part of the world's continuing story. Perhaps that belief offered comfort to those who first listened beside evening fires many centuries ago. Perhaps it still can. Unable to bear what had happened, Izanagi's grief slowly transformed into anger. Not the loud anger of war, but the quiet anger that sometimes follows great loss. He looked upon Kate as such other child whose birth had taken away the companion with whom he had created the world. In one of the oldest and most solemn moments of Japanese mythology, Izanagi drew his sword. The blade itself would later become famous within the traditions of Japan. Known as *** Tetsuka no Tsurugi ***, it represented not only strength but responsibility. When the sword fell, the fire Kami was struck down. Yet even here the story does not dwell upon violence. Instead, something remarkable happens. From the blood fallen upon rocks, new Kami emerged. From the fragments scattered across the earth, more divine beings appeared. Mountains, volcanoes, metalworking, the forces hidden beneath the land. Creation continued once again, not despite tragedy but somehow through it. To modern ears this may sound unusual. How can loss create life? How can endings become beginnings? Yet nature quietly offers the same lesson every year. A forest fire may destroy ancient trees, yet months late new plants begin appearing from soil enriched by ash. Old leaves fall each autumn, allowing fresh growth to arrive with spring. The myths reflected the rhythms people observed around them. Death and renewal were never completely separate. One gently flowed into the other. As the world settled after these events, something important had changed. Creation no longer felt untouched. Until now, everything had been peaceful. Everything had grown steadily toward harmony. Now the universe carried memory. It remembered joy. It remembered sorrow. It remembered love. And it remembered loss. In many ways, this is the moment when the myth begins resembling human life. No life remains untouched by change forever. Even the most peaceful families eventually know goodbye. Even the happiest years quietly become memories. The ancient storytellers understood this. Rather than pretending sorrow could be avoided, they placed it at the very heart of creation itself. Yet the story was far from over. For although Izanami had left the world of the living, Izanagi could not accept that farewell. His grief remained. Day after day the islands reminded him of her. The rivers they had helped create continued flowing. The mountains stood where they had first imagined them. Every corner of the young world carried memories of the companion who was no longer beside him. Eventually one thought grew impossible to ignore. If the world of the living could not return as an army to him, then perhaps he would travel to where she had gone. It was an impossible journey, one no Kami had yet attempted. A journey into the mysterious land known as *** Yomi ***, a realm of the dead. And so one of the oldest journeys in Japanese mythology quietly began. There are few places in Japanese mythology more mysterious than Yomi. Unlike the bright heavens where the first Kami came into being, or the peaceful islands that Izanagi and Izanami had carefully created together, Yomi existed beyond both life and sunlight. It was not a kingdom that travelers could simply visit. No roads led there. No ships crossed toward its distant shores. No mountains marked its boundaries. It belonged to another part of existence entirely. For thousands of years, people throughout Japan imagined Yomi in different ways. Some pictured an enormous underground realm hidden beneath the earth. Others believed it rested impossibly far away, beyond every mountain, beyond every sea, beyond the place where even the sun completed its daily journey. The oldest texts never attempt to describe every detail. Perhaps because no living person was ever meant to know exactly what waited there. Mystery itself became part of the story, and perhaps that mystery made the tale even more powerful, for Izanagi was not simply an unknown land. It was where Izanami had gone. Every quiet morning reminded him of her. Every river flowing across the islands they had created together carried another memory. The forests continued growing. The mountains remained exactly where they had left them. The world itself seemed perfectly willing to continue. Only Izanagi remained unable to do the same. Grief has a curious way of changing how time feels. Some days seem impossibly long. Others disappear almost unnoticed. Ancient storytellers understood this without needing complicated words. Rather than describing countless days passing, they simply tell us that eventually Izanagi decided to follow her. It was not a decision made from courage, nor from curiosity. It came from love. That simple feeling has carried people toward impossible journeys throughout history. The myths quietly remind us that even divine beings were no different. Imagine standing at the edge of the known world. Behind you the mountains, the forests, the rivers. Everything familiar, ahead only uncertainty. No one could promise the journey would succeed. No one could promise there would even be a way back. Yet still he began walking. The old chronicles tell us very little about the road itself, only that Izanagi eventually reached the entrance to Yomi. The imagination naturally fills the silence left by the ancient riders. Perhaps the path descended slowly through valleys where sunlight gradually became weaker. Perhaps towering cliffs surrounded the narrow road. Perhaps ancient trees grew so closely together that daylight barely reached the earth below. Or perhaps the journey became quieter with every step. The birds slowly disappeared. The wind grew still. Even the sound of flowing water faded into silence. Many traditional Japanese paintings inspired by the story depict mist. Not thick enough to hide the path, only enough to soften it. Mist has always occupied a special place within Japanese art and literature. It conceals without frightening. It invites imagination rather than certainty. A distant mountain half hidden by morning fog often feels more mysterious than one completely visible. Perhaps Yomi was imagined in much the same way, not as a terrifying place but as one forever separated from ordinary life. Eventually the road ended. Before Izanagi stood an enormous entrance. The old texts describe it simply as the slope leading into Yomi. Simple words. Yet behind them lies an extraordinary image. A doorway between two worlds, one filled with sunlight, one forever beyond it. Many cultures throughout history imagined rivers separating life from death. Others imagined bridges. The Japanese instead imagined a long descending slope, almost as though one simply walked farther and farther away from the familiar world until eventually it no longer remained behind you. Standing there, Izanagi called out. His voice echoed into the darkness beyond. He called for Izanami, not as the creator of islands, not as one of the great kami, simply as someone searching for the person he loved. After a long silence, an answer came. Her voice. The ancient texts tell us she replied from somewhere beyond sight. Unable to see one another, the two spoke across the boundary separating life from death. It is one of the quietest conversations in Japanese mythology. No armies waited nearby. No great monsters interrupted them. Only two familiar voices meeting once more after an impossible separation. Izanagi pleaded with her. He asked her to return. The world they had created together was unfinished. The islands still needed her. The kami still needed her. Most of all, he needed her. For a brief moment hope returned. Izanami answered gently. She explained that she wished to return as well. But there was a problem. She had already eaten the food of Yomi. This idea appears in many ancient cultures. Once someone accepts the food of the land beyond life, they become part of it. The boundary cannot easily be crossed again. Still, she promised something. She would ask permission. She would speak with those who ruled Yomi. Perhaps, just perhaps, a way might still exist. Before leaving, she made one simple request. Do not look at me. Wait here, no matter how long it takes. Do not follow. Do not search for me. Trust that I will return." Then silence once again. Time passed. How much the myths never say. Perhaps hours, perhaps days, perhaps far longer. With an old story's time often flows differently. Izanagi waited, patiently at first. The entrance remained still. No footsteps approached, no voice answered, only silence surrounded him. It is easy for us, knowing how the story continues, to wonder why he eventually grew restless. Yet imagine waiting for someone you love, unable to see them, unable to know whether they are safe, unable even to know whether they still remember you. The silence itself becomes heavy. The mind begins imagining countless possibilities. Perhaps she cannot find the way. Perhaps something has happened. Perhaps she needs help. Little by little, patience gave way to uncertainty. Uncertainty slowly became worry, and worry became a decision, one that would forever change both the story and the relationship between the worlds of the living and the dead. Slowly, very slowly, Izanagi stepped beyond the entrance, into Yomi itself, not knowing that some doors, once opened, can never again be completely closed. The first steps into Yomi were unlike any journey Izanagi had ever taken. Until now, every place he had visited had belonged to the world he helped create. The mountains welcomed sunlight. The rivers reflected the sky. The forests breathed with the wind. Even the deepest valleys still belonged to life. Yomi was different, not because it was filled with monsters, not because it was consumed by endless darkness, but because nothing there truly belonged to the living anymore. The old Japanese chronicles describe remarkably little about the land itself. In many ways, that silence makes Yomi even more mysterious. Rather than describing every tree, every mountain, or every path, the storytellers allowed listeners to imagine those places for themselves. Perhaps each generation pictured Yomi differently. A vast underground kingdom, a quiet land beyond distant mountains, a world forever wrapped in twilight, was simply a place where life no longer reached. Whatever image people carried in their minds, one thing remained certain. It was a place no one wished to enter. And yet Izanagi continued walking. The air felt strangely still. There were no familiar birds greeting the morning, no insects humming quietly among grasses, no streams carrying fresh mountain water. Even the wind seemed reluctant to move. Imagine walking through a forest after fresh snowfall. The silence becomes almost physical. Every sound feels softer, every step more noticeable. Now imagine something quieter still, a silence so complete that even your own breathing feels unusually loud. Perhaps that is the closest we can come to imagining Yomi. The ancient Japanese rarely imagined death as loud. They imagined it as distant, removed, separated from the rhythms of ordinary life. The farther Izanagi walked, the less familiar the world became. The trees, if there were trees, seemed older than memory, not dead, simply ancient beyond measure. The path stretched onward without clear destination. Mist drifted slowly across the ground, not thick enough to hide the road, only enough to soften everything beyond a short distance. Japanese painters would later return to this image again and again. Mist, mountains, hidden paths, things only partly revealed, perhaps because mystery often feels more peaceful than certainty. Eventually, far ahead, a faint outline began appearing through the pale haze. A great hall, or perhaps a palace. The oldest texts never fully explain. Some describe it simply as the dwelling where Izanami remained. Others leave almost everything unsaid. The building itself mattered less than who waited within. Standing outside, Izanagi called once again. His voice echoed softly through the quiet land. For a few long moments nothing answered. Then at last Izanami spoke. Her voice was familiar, gentle, almost unchanged. Yet something about it carried a distance that had not existed before. Not emotional distance. The distance of two people separated by worlds. She reminded him once again that he should not have entered. She had asked him to wait. She had asked him not to look. Still she had not forgotten him, nor had she stopped caring. According to the ancient story, she explained once more that she had already eaten the food of Yomi. This small detail became one of the most important ideas in Japanese mythology. Food in almost every culture represents belonging. Sharing a meal often means becoming part of a family, part of a village, part of a community. Within these ancient stories, eating the food of Yomi meant becoming part of that world. Its laws now applied. Its boundaries could no longer be crossed so easily. The idea appears in myths from many civilizations, perhaps because it speaks to something deeply human. There are moments in life after which nothing can return exactly as it once was. Growing older, leaving home, losing someone we love. Certain doors quietly close behind us. The ancient storytellers understood this. Rather than explaining it through philosophy, they simply spoke of a shared meal. Even now, Izanami wished to return. She had not refused him. She simply could not leave yet. Again she asked him, "Please wait. Do not look upon me. Trust me." The request was simple. The silence that followed was not. Minutes passed, or perhaps hours. The old texts remained silent. Time behaves strangely inside myths, especially those concerning the world beyond life. At first, Izanagi waited exactly as he had promised. He remained where he stood, patient, hopeful, certain she would soon return. But silence has a curious way of changing the human heart. The longer it lasts, the louder our thoughts become. Questions slowly appear. What is taking so long? Is everything all right? Has something gone wrong? Should I call again? Should I wait longer? Perhaps everyone has experienced moments like these. Waiting outside a hospital room. Waiting beside a telephone. Waiting for a familiar face that never seems to arrive. Silence slowly fills with imagination. The old myth understands this perfectly. It never accuses Izanagi of impatience. It simply allows him to remain human. Even though he was one of the creators of the world, eventually he looked around. Nearby he noticed the long comb resting within his hair. The ancient Japanese often wore combs carved from wood. Simple objects. Useful, beautiful, everyday belongings. Very gently he broke one of its teeth. The tiny piece of wood became a torch. Its small flame pushed back the surrounding darkness just enough to illuminate what lay ahead. Not the entire hall, not the entire world, only a single corner, just enough to see. Perhaps that is how curiosity always begins. Not by seeking everything, only one small glimpse, one careful look. Holding the tiny flame before him, Izanagi stepped forward. The light flickered softly against ancient walls. The shadows moved gently with every breath. Then the flame reached the figure waiting within. And for the first time he looked upon Izanami. The myths become unexpectedly solemn here. They do not dwell upon horror. They do not attempt to frighten the listener. Instead, they quietly remind us of a truth every human life eventually faces. Death changes those it touches. The companion who had once stood beside him upon the floating bridge of heaven, who had watched the first island rise from the sea, who had helped give birth to mountains, forests, and rivers, could no longer appear as she once had. The world of Yomi had already claimed her. The old chronicles describe her body as belonging to death now. Later storytellers would add vivid details, but the oldest versions remain surprisingly restrained. The tragedy does not lie in what Izanagi sees. The tragedy lies in what he understands. She cannot return, not because she does not wish to, but because the world itself has changed. Some journeys cannot be undone. The tiny flame trembled. Silence filled the hall once again. Then Izanami realized he had broken his promise. He had looked. The request she had made with such quiet hope had been broken. And in that single moment, the peaceful sadness of the story would soon give way to one of the oldest chases in Japanese mythology. For the boundary between life and death had now been crossed by both love and regret. For a single, quiet moment, neither of them spoke. The tiny flame continued trembling gently within Izanagi's hand. Its warm light danced across the ancient hall. The silence between them felt heavier than the mountains they had once created together. Izanagi stood completely still, not because he no longer wished to move, but because he finally understood. The journey had been impossible from the very beginning, not because he lacked courage, not because he lacked love, but because some journeys cannot return us to the moment we wish to reclaim. The world had already changed. So had Izanami. There is something deeply human about this moment. Many of us have wished, at one time or another, for just one more conversation, one more afternoon, one more chance to return to the way things once were. The ancient storytellers understood that feeling remarkably well. Rather than pretending such wishes could always come true, they gave those feelings to the very creators of the world. Even Izanagi, who had helped shape mountains and islands, could not change everything. Then silence broke. According to the oldest chronicles, Izanami became overwhelmed, not simply because she had been seen, but because the promise she had asked him to keep had been broken. There is sadness hidden beneath this moment. She had trusted him. She had asked for patience. Only a little longer. Only until she could return. Instead, curiosity had spoken first. The old stories rarely judge Izanagi harshly, nor do they condemn Izanami. Instead, they simply allow both figures to remain understandable. One acted from worry, the other from disappointment. Perhaps that is why this myth has survived for so many centuries. Its emotions remain familiar. The peaceful conversation came to an end. Izanami's voice changed. The world of Yomi itself seemed to awaken. The ancient texts tell us that she called upon the beings who dwelled within the land beyond life. Later storytellers gave them many names. Among them were the terrifying **Yamatsu often translated as the Hags of Yomi. Yet even here the oldest myths spend remarkably little time describing frightening appearances. Their purpose within the story is simple: to prevent the living from taking back what already belongs to death. The chase began, not with thunder, not with crashing armies, only with footsteps echoing through the quiet halls of Yomi. Izanagi turned and began running toward the world of the living. Behind him the sounds slowly grew louder. The distance between worlds suddenly felt much greater than it had before. The road that had seemed manageable while walking inward now stretched endlessly ahead. Every step carried urgency. Every shadow seemed longer. Every turn of the ancient path disappeared into drifting mist. Yet even during this chase, the myth never completely abandons its quiet atmosphere. It is not the frantic pursuit found in many modern stories. Instead, it feels dreamlike, almost unreal, like trying to leave a place that gently refuses to let you go. As he hurried along the path, Izanagi remembered something he still carried: the old wooden comb. Earlier, one of its teeth had become his small torch. Now the comb itself remained. Without stopping, he threw it behind him. The ancient stories tell us something beautiful happened. The comb struck the earth and immediately transformed. From the place where it landed, thick clusters of bamboo began growing, tall, green, countless slender stalks rising together. The pursuing spirits paused. For a brief moment, their attention shifted toward the bamboo. The myth never explains exactly why. Perhaps curiosity, perhaps hunger, perhaps simple distraction. Whatever the reason, Izanagi gained precious distance. It is a wonderfully gentle piece of mythology. Even while fleeing creation continues, objects become forests. Simple belongings become part of nature. The world itself seems eager to grow. The chase continued. The path remained long. The mist refused to lift. Again the sounds behind him drew nearer. This time Izanagi reached toward another familiar object, a cluster of grapes. He cast them behind him onto the ancient road. The grapes scattered across the ground. Immediately their spirits stopped once more. Instead of continuing the pursuit, they gathered the fruit, one by one. The old myth lingers here for only a moment, yet there is something strangely comforting about it. The beings of Yomi, for all their determination, could still be delayed by something as simple as food growing upon the earth. It reminds us once again that these myths were never intended to become tales of endless violence. Even danger often gives way to surprisingly peaceful images. Bamboo growing beside forgotten paths, clusters of grapes resting quietly upon the ground. Nature continues existing even in stories about death. Far ahead, the entrance to Yomi slowly became visible once more, a faint light, almost impossible to see at first, then growing brighter with every step. For anyone who has walked through a long tunnel toward daylight, the image feels familiar. The father Izanagi ran closer, the world of the living appeared. The air itself seemed lighter. The silence changed. The world beyond the entrance almost seemed to breathe. Yet the pursuit had not ended. The spirits continued following. And behind them, according to the oldest story, Izanami herself now approached. Not from hatred alone, but because the boundary between the worlds had already been broken. The separation demanded completion. The entrance lay only a short distance ahead. One final effort remained, one final choice. The ancient myths often remind us that enormous changes sometimes depend upon very small actions. A single drop from a jeweled spirit created the first island. A single broken promise had transformed this journey. Now a single stone would forever separate the living from the dead. As Izanagi crossed back into the world of sunlight, he searched desperately around him. Nearby rested an enormous boulder, not a mountain, not a cliff, simply great stone, the kind one might still imagine resting quietly beside an old forest path. Gathering every remaining ounce of strength, he pushed. Slowly the stone rolled forward. Its weight echoed across the valley, until finally it settled directly across the entrance to Yomi. The path closed. Silence returned. The great boulder became more than a stone. It became a boundary, one world on either side. Life and death separated once more. The old chronicles tell us that Izanagi stood upon one side, Izanami upon the other. Neither could cross. Neither could return to the days when they had stood together upon the floating bridge of heaven. The first creators of Japan now lived forever in different worlds. Between them rested only the great stone, quiet, motionless, ancient, waiting. And there, standing on opposite sides of that silent boundary, the two who had once created the world together would speak to one another for the very last time. The great stone rested silently across the entrance to Yomi. For the first time since his impossible journey had begun, Izanagi stopped moving. His breathing slowly became calm once more. The world of the living surrounded him again. Fresh air drifted gently across the land. Somewhere in the distance, water continued flowing toward the sea. The sky above remained open and bright. It was the same world he had left, yet nothing felt quite the same. There are moments in every life after which we quietly understand that something has changed forever. Sometimes we recognize those moments immediately, sometimes only years later. For Izanagi standing before the stone, the realization arrived all at once. The journey had ended, not because he had succeeded, but because there was nowhere else left to go. On the opposite side of the great boulder, beyond the boundary separating life from death, Izanami remained. Neither could see the other now. Only the stone stood between them. Yet voices could still pass. The oldest Japanese texts tell us that one final conversation took place across that silent barrier. It would become one of the most important conversations in all of Japanese mythology, not because kingdoms would rise from it, not because battles would begin, but because it explained something every human being eventually wonders. Why must people die? The silence lingered. Then Izanami spoke. Her voice no longer carried the warmth of the world they had once created together, nor did it carry hatred alone. Instead, it sounded like someone who understood that nothing could return to the way it had been. According to the ancient story, she declared that if she could no longer return to the land of the living, then every day she would take 1,000 lives. It is a solemn statement, yet it is also deeply symbolic. The myth was never trying to frighten its listeners. Instead, it was searching for an explanation. Every community eventually experiences loss. Every family eventually says goodbye. Rather than accepting death as meaningless, the storytellers wove it gently into the fabric of creation itself. Death did not arrive by accident. It became part of the balance of the world. Standing upon the side of life, Izanagi listened quietly. Then he answered, "If 1,000 people must leave the world each day," he said, "then 1,500 children would be born." Again the myth chooses balance. Not victory, not revenge. Balance. Life and death would continue together, one making room for the other, one never completely overcoming the other. For more than 1,300 years people have repeated this exchange. Some heard it as an explanation for why life continues despite loss. Others saw it as a reminder that every ending quietly allows another beginning. Even today there is something comforting about that thought. Morning follows night. Spring follows winter. New forests slowly grow where old ones once stood. Children are born while grandparents become cherished memories. The world never remains exactly the same, yet neither does it become empty. The ancient myth simply expresses this truth in the language of gods. The conversation ended. No further promises were made. No miracle reunited them. No hidden doorway suddenly appeared. The stone remained where it had been placed, silent, patient, unmoving. In later centuries, Japanese storytellers gave this stone a name. It became known as the asterisk Chigishi no Akami ***, a great boulder that turns back the road, not merely a rock, but a sacred boundary. Even today throughout Japan, certain places are marked by stones, gates, or ropes that quietly remind visitors they are crossing into somewhere deserving of respect. Perhaps traditions like these echo stories such as this one. The idea that boundaries matter. Not every place should be entered carelessly. Not every mystery must be solved. Not every door should be opened. Izanagi slowly turned away from the entrance to Yomi. Behind him the land of the dead disappeared once more into silence. Ahead the world waited. Mountains still stood. Forests still breathed. The sea still surrounded the islands. Nothing within nature had changed, yet everything within him had. Grief has a curious way of doing that. The world often looks exactly as it did before. The same roads, the same rivers, the same sunrise. Yet the one walking through it has become someone different. The myth quietly understands this. It never suggests that Izanagi simply forgot. Instead, he carried those memories with him. Every forest reminded him of the world they had created together. Every river recalled another conversation. Every island carried traces of the companion now forever separated from him. As he walked farther from Yomi, another thought slowly entered the story. The land beyond death had touched him, not physically, spiritually. Within many ancient traditions, crossing into the realm of the dead brought a form of ritual impurity. Not because death itself was evil, but because life and death belonged to different worlds. Their boundaries required respect. Having crossed into Yomi, Izanagi understood that he could not simply continue as though nothing had happened. Something needed to be cleansed. Not guilt, not shame, simply the lingering presence of another realm. This idea would become one of the foundations of Shinto tradition. Purification. Not punishment, but renewal. For thousands of years afterward, people entering shrines would wash their hands, rinse their mouths, pause quietly before approaching sacred places. These simple acts may seem ordinary today, yet their roots stretch back towards stories like this one. Stories reminding people that before beginning something sacred, one should first become still, become clean, become present. As Izanagi continued his journey, the mountains gradually became brighter. Birdsong returned. The wind once again moved gently through young trees. The world welcomed him home. But the greatest moment of purification, the moment that would give birth to some of the most beloved kami in all of Japan, had not yet arrived. It waited beside flowing water, where grief, loss, and the shadows of Yom would slowly be washed away, and from those quiet waters the sun herself would soon rise. Leaving Yomi behind did not immediately bring peace. The great stone now rested forever between the worlds of the living and the dead.
The journey had ended. The chase was over.
The voices had fallen silent.
Yet Izanagi did not feel as though he had truly returned home.
The ancient stories describe this feeling using a word that would later become deeply important within Shinto tradition. *Kegger. Often translated as impurity. Yet the English word can easily be misunderstood. It does not mean sin,
nor does it suggest guilt.
It is something quieter, something more natural, like dust slowly gathering upon an old wooden floor, or the way muddy shoes carry traces of distant roads into a peaceful home.
Nothing evil.
Simply something that should not remain forever.
The journey through Yomi had left such traces upon him.
Not wounds, not illness, but the lingering presence of a world where life no longer existed. For the ancient Japanese, life and death belonged to different realms.
Each deserved respect,
yet neither should become confused with the other.
The boundary mattered.
And so Izanagi began searching for flowing water. There is something wonderfully simple about this decision. He does not seek a powerful weapon. He does not ask another kami to remove what he carries.
Instead, he walks quietly toward a river.
Even today, water remains one of humanity's oldest symbols of renewal. Rain washes dust from leaves. Streams polish rough stones over countless centuries. The sea reshapes entire coastlands without ever raising its voice. Perhaps because water changes things so gently, people have long believed it could also cleanse the unseen.
Eventually, according to the ancient chronicles, Izanagi arrived beside a peaceful river. Some traditions say it was the mouth of the Tacubana River.
Others simply speak of clear flowing water. The exact place matters less than what happens there. Imagine the scene. Morning has only just begun. Mist still rests above the surface of the river. The current moves quietly around smooth stones. Tall reeds sway gently whenever the breeze passes. Somewhere nearby, birds greet the returning sunlight.
After everything that has happened, the world feels astonishingly peaceful.
It is difficult to imagine a better place to begin again.
Before entering the waters, Izanagi removes the garments worn during his journey.
As each piece touches the earth, the old stories tell us that new kami appear. This may seem surprising, yet by now creation itself has become familiar. Throughout Japanese mythology, nothing exists entirely alone. Even clothing,
even jewelry,
even ordinary possessions may quietly give rise to something new. The world remains alive with possibility. One by one, his walking staff is set aside. A kami is born.
His sash. Another kami. His robes. His ornaments.
Each quietly becomes part of creation. The myth reminds us once again nothing is wasted. Everything carries the potential for new beginnings. Slowly Izanagi steps into the river. The water reaches his feet.
Cool, clear, gentle.
There is no urgency, no dramatic music, no heavenly voices. Only flowing water continuing exactly as rivers always have. Perhaps that is the point. Nature itself becomes the place of healing. Not a palace, not a throne.
A river. The current moves softly around him,
carrying away the dust gathered from distant roads.
The water reflects the bright morning sky. Small ripples spread outward with every careful step.
Imagine standing there yourself. The warmth of the rising sun upon your shoulders. The coolness of clear water around your feet.
The scent of fresh earth after morning dew.
The gentle sound of birds hidden among nearby trees. There are few places more peaceful. The ancient storytellers understood this. They chose a river because rivers have always represented movement. Nothing remains trapped forever. The water flowing past you today will never pass again. It continues onward toward the sea, always moving, always changing. Perhaps grief moves much the same way. It never truly disappears.
Yet over time it flows differently.
As Izanagi washed himself, the old chronicles tell us that many more kami quietly came into existence. Some emerged from droplets of water, others from objects he carried, others still from the simple act of purification itself.
Creation had not ended with the first islands.
It continued wherever harmony returned. Then the story reaches one of its most beautiful moments.
As Izanagi washed his left eye, something extraordinary happened.
From the clear water brilliant Calmi appeared.
Her name was Amaterasu
the great goddess of the sun. Among all the Calmi within Japanese mythology, few would become more beloved. Her light would eventually warm every mountain, every forest, every rice field, every village, every quiet path leading toward distant shrines. Even today, when the morning sun rises above the islands of Japan, many people cannot help but remember her name. It is remarkable that the sun, one of the oldest symbols of life across countless civilizations, is born here not from battle, not from fire, but from purification, from washing away sorrow. There's something profoundly hopeful about that idea. Light arrives after grief.
Morning follows the darkest night.
The myth speaks softly,
yet its message echoes across centuries. Next, Izanagi washed his right eye.
Again the river shimmered. Again a new Kami emerged.
This time it was Tsukayomi
the Kami of the moon.
Quiet, calm,
watching over the night sky. If Amaterasu brought warmth and daylight, Tsukayomi brought stillness. Moonlight upon rivers, silver reflections across quiet lakes, the peaceful silence of midnight forests. Together the sun and moon completed one another.
Day and night,
light and shadow, wakefulness and rest. The balance of the heavens slowly came into being.
Finally, Izanagi washed his nose. From that final act emerged another great Kami.
Susanoo. The Kami of storms,
of seas,
of powerful winds crossing the islands. Unlike the gentle calm of Amaterasu or the quiet dignity of Tsukayomi, Susanoo would become one of the most unpredictable figures in Japanese mythology.
His stories would carry laughter, adventure, anger, loss,
and redemption. But those tales belonged to another day.
Standing quietly within the river, Izanagi looked upon the three great Kami now before him: the sun, the moon,
and the storms. The heavens themselves had found new guardians. It is extraordinary to think that some of Japan's greatest deities entered the world not during its beginning, but after one of its greatest tragedies. After grief,
after loss,
after an impossible journey into Yomi. The myth seems to whisper something gentle across more than 1,000 years. Even after our darkest journeys, something beautiful may still quietly emerge. The river continued flowing,
unconcerned with history, unconcerned with myth,
simply carrying its waters toward the sea as rivers always have. And with the birth of Amaterasu, a new chapter in Japanese mythology quietly began. One that would eventually lead to a cave, a mirror, and a world that, for a little while, forgot what sunlight looked like. For countless generations, people across Japan have watched the sunrise with quiet admiration. Morning light slowly reaches the highest mountain peaks. Mist begins disappearing from peaceful valleys.
The sea catches the first golden reflections of a new day.
Birds awaken. Rivers sparkle. The world gently stretches into another morning. It is such an ordinary part of life that it is easy to forget how extraordinary sunlight truly is. Every harvest depends upon it. Every forest quietly reaches toward it. Every flower patiently waits for its warmth. The ancient Japanese understood this deeply. Perhaps that is why among all the Kami, Amaterasu became one of the most beloved. She was not merely the goddess of the sun.
She became the very reason morning arrived. Without her, the world itself would fall silent.
After emerging from the clear waters of purification, Amaterasu was given an important responsibility:
the heavens themselves.
The endless sky above the newly formed world. There she would guide the passage of every day. Each dawn she would gently bring light across the islands. Each evening she would allow night to arrive peacefully. Balance,
order, harmony.
The world slowly settled beneath her watchful light. Her brother Tsukayomi was entrusted with the quiet beauty of the moon.
His path belonged to the night.
While people rested beneath stars, the moon would softly watch over forests, villages, and distant mountain temples.
Then there was Susanoo.
Unlike his brother and sister, he was never truly content with stillness. The ancient stories describe him as passionate, powerful,
Often unpredictable, he governed storms.
the restless sea, the winds that could transform peaceful skies within moments.
Perhaps anyone who has watched waves crash against the rocky Japanese coastline or witnessed powerful typhoons crossing the islands can understand why such forces became connected to a single Komi.
The sea itself rarely remains perfectly calm forever. Neither did Susanoo.
At first, the three siblings lived peacefully, each carrying responsibilities essential to the world: the heavens, the moon, the storms.
Together they completed creation. The islands flourished beneath their care. Rice fields slowly appeared. Forests continued growing. Mountains stood quietly against the horizon. The rhythm of day and night became familiar. People would later come to measure their lives through that rhythm, planting in spring,
Harvesting in autumn, resting through winter.
welcoming each sunrise with gratitude. Yet harmony rarely remains unchanged forever. According to the oldest myths, Susanoo began behaving in ways that deeply troubled the heavens. Some stories say he mourned his mother, Izanami, so greatly that sorrow became anger.
Others describe him as refusing the responsibilities placed upon him.
Instead of governing the seas, he wandered. Instead of protecting the world, his grief slowly became destructive. It is an interesting detail. Japanese mythology rarely presents its figures as completely good or completely evil. Even Susanoo, whose actions would soon bring great sorrow, was not born wicked.
He was hurting.
The ancient storytellers quietly remind us that grief, when left untended, may sometimes become something else. Eventually, Susanoo climbed into the heavenly realm where Amaterasu ruled.
At first, his sister welcomed him.
She wished to believe peace remained possible. She hoped misunderstanding could be resolved. There is something gentle about that hope. How often do families wish the same?
That difficult conversations might end peacefully.
That old wounds might finally heal. For a brief time it seemed possible. The two spoke together. Some versions of the myth describe a ritual proving their sincerity. Others tell of sacred jewels and divine swords exchanged between them. The details differ slightly across the oldest texts.
Yet the spirit remains similar.
Trust was offered. Harmony was given another chance. Sadly, it did not last. The stories describe Susanoo becoming increasingly reckless. Fields carefully tended by Amaterasu were damaged. Sacred places became disturbed. Order slowly gave way to confusion. The heavens themselves seemed uneasy.
Then came the event most often remembered.
The weaving hall. Among the heavenly kami, several maidens quietly worked together, weaving beautiful cloth.
The hall itself was peaceful.
Wooden beams,
Soft light.
patient hands guiding thread across carefully prepared looms.
It was a place of calm craftsmanship.
Then, without warning, Susanoo performed an act so shocking that even today many versions of the story describe it only briefly.
He cast the hide of a heavenly horse through the roof of the weaving hall.
Panic followed.
The peaceful work came to an abrupt end.
Fear spread through the heavenly realm. Different versions describe the consequences differently, yet every version agrees upon one thing.
Something precious had been broken. Not simply a building.
Not simply a ceremony. Trust itself. For Amaterasu, the sorrow became overwhelming. She had offered understanding. She had offered patience. Yet the heavens no longer felt safe. And so she made a decision that would change the world.
Rather than confronting her brother, rather than punishing him, she quietly withdrew.
Deep within the heavenly realm stood a cave, known as **Armino**, the heavenly rock cave.
Without speaking another word, Amaterasu entered. Then she closed the great stone entrance behind her. At first, perhaps nothing seemed different.
The world below continued as always. Birds still sang. The rivers still flowed. The winds still wandered through forests. But slowly something extraordinary began happening. The sunlight faded.
Morning never truly arrived.
The sky grew dim. The warmth that had always touched the islands quietly disappeared. Imagine a world where dawn simply never comes. The mountains remain hidden beneath endless twilight. The forests lose their brilliant greens.
Flowers close.
The sea becomes cold and gray. Birds fall strangely silent. People wait certain morning must surely arrive soon.
Yet it never does. The ancient Japanese understood how frightening such an image could feel.
Without sunlight, the balance of the world itself begins slipping away.
The kami grew concerned.
The heavens fell unusually quiet.
Even Susan knew whose actions had caused this sorrow could not simply replace what had been lost. The sun had never belonged to him.
It belonged to Amaterasu alone. Gathering together, the countless kami began asking themselves a simple question. How do you convince the sun to shine once more? It is one of the most beautiful questions in all of Japanese mythology, not because it concerns power, but because it concerns hope. Somewhere beyond the great stone door, Amaterasu remained alone. The world waited outside,
patiently, quietly,
longing for morning to return. The world waited, not for a battle, not for a miracle, simply for the morning. Across the islands that Izanagi and Izanami had once created together, darkness remained. The forests no longer glowed with the gentle light of dawn. The mountains became quiet silhouettes against an endless twilight. The rivers still flowed faithfully toward the sea, yet without sunlight their waters reflected only a dim gray sky. Birds sang less often. Flowers remained closed. Even the seasons themselves seemed uncertain.
To the people who first shared this story, the disappearance of the sun was not simply an event.
It represented something every human being understands. What happens when joy quietly leaves the world? There are moments in every life when the days seem unusually dark, not because the sun has disappeared, but because hope itself feels hidden. The ancient storytellers gave that feeling a form.
A cave.
And behind its stone entrance the light of the world waited in silence. Among the heavenly kami, concern slowly became urgency.
Without Amaterasu, creation itself could not continue as it should.
The rice would no longer grow. The forests would slowly weaken.
The balance between day and night had been broken. The kami gathered together,
one after another. Some arrived from distant mountains, others from rivers. Some from forests older than memory, others from winds that wandered endlessly across the islands. Soon the heavenly plain became filled with divine beings, each wondering the same thing. How could they persuade the sun to return? It is interesting that no one immediately suggested forcing open the cave. No mighty army marched toward its entrance. No great weapon was raised against the stone. Instead, the kami began discussing,
thinking, listening,
searching together for another answer. Perhaps they understood something important. Light cannot always be forced back into the world. Sometimes it must be invited.
The oldest chronicles tell us that when kami stepped forward with an unusual idea, rather than confronting Amaterasu with anger, they would remind her of the joy still waiting outside.
The heavens quickly became busy, not with preparing for war, but with preparing a celebration. Sacred trees were carefully chosen. Beautiful evergreen branches were gathered. These were not ordinary branches. In Japan, evergreen trees have long symbolized endurance. Even during the coldest winters, they remain green,
patient, steadfast.
Perhaps they seem the perfect reminder that hope can survive even the darkest seasons.
The branches were decorated carefully.
Long strands of precious jewels were suspended from them. Each bead caught what little light still remained. Together they formed shimmering necklaces unlike anything the young world had yet seen. Nearby, another kami began polishing a remarkable object.
A mirror.
Simple in shape, yet extraordinary in meaning.
Mirrors held a special place within ancient Japan.
Unlike paintings, a mirror does not invent. It simply reveals.
The kami polished its surface until it reflected even the faintest light.
Later, this mirror would become one of the 3 sacred treasures of Japan. but today it served another purpose.
It would help bring back the sun.
The preparations continued. Birds were invited. Music was arranged. Even laughter, something almost forgotten during the long darkness, would soon become part of the plan. Among all those gathered, one Kami quietly stepped forward. Her name was **Nemuyā**. She is one of the most delightful figures in all of Japanese mythology, not because she commanded storms, not because she possessed overwhelming strength, but because she understood something few others did. Sometimes the world needs laughter. Sometimes the surest way to push back darkness is not through power but through joy.
Standing before the entrance to the heavenly rock cave, Izumi overturned a large wooden tub.
It became her stage.
The assembled Kami watched silently. The cave remained closed.
No light escaped. No voice answered from within. Then very gently Izumi began to dance. The ancient texts never describe every movement.
They leave room for imagination.
Perhaps her feet moved softly across the wooden surface. Perhaps her sleeves flowed like rivers in the wind.
Perhaps her laughter echoed through the silent heavens.
Little by little the gathered Kami began smiling. The dance became livelier. The music grew brighter. Soon laughter spread through the entire heavenly plain. Not forced laughter. Real laughter. The kind that arrives unexpectedly after many difficult days. Imagine the scene. The world below still rests beneath darkness. Yet here before the cave hundreds of Kami laughed together beneath a sky waiting for sunrise. The sound echoed everywhere. Across mountains. Across clouds. Across the silent heavens themselves. Inside the cave Amaterasu heard them. She had expected sadness. Silence. Perhaps even despair.
Instead she heard celebration.
Curiosity quietly replaced sorrow.
She wondered how could everyone possibly be laughing when the world remained without its sun.
Slowly she approached the great stones sealing the cave.
Not enough to leave.
Only enough to listen.
Outside the laughter continued.
Izumi danced more joyfully than before.
The Kami applauded.
Music filled the heavens.
For the first time since entering the cave Amaterasu spoke.
According to the ancient chronicles, she called from within.
She asked a simple question. Why do you celebrate? The gathered Kami answered carefully.
We rejoice because someone greater than you has appeared.
The statement surprised her. Greater than the sun? How could such a thing exist?
Curiosity grew stronger. Very slowly the stone moved. Only a little. Just enough for a single ray of light to escape. For the first time in many days the heavens brightened ever so slightly. The assembled Kami remained perfectly still. Not one wished to ruin the moment. Amaterasu looked outward, wonder filling her heart. Then she noticed something extraordinary. Standing directly before the cave she saw another radiant figure.
Beautiful, brilliant,
shining with golden light. She had never seen this Kami before.
Slowly she leaned closer.
The mysterious figure did exactly the same. Only then did Amaterasu realize the truth.
She had been looking into the mirror. For the very first time she saw her own light reflected back toward herself.
The ancient storytellers chose a remarkably beautiful image. The sun returns not because someone defeats darkness, but because it remembers its own light.
Before she could retreat once again, one of the strongest Kami waiting nearby quietly stepped forward. Known as **Aim no Tejikaro**. He gently, but firmly pulled Amaterasu completely from the cave.
Behind her another Kami immediately stretched a sacred rope across the entrance. A **Shamnar were **.
Its purpose was simple, to mark the cave as a sacred boundary,
and to prevent the sun from hiding there again.
At that very moment morning returned.
Light spread across the heavens. Golden rays touched the mountaintops. The forests awakened. Birds began singing once more. The rivers sparkled beneath the returning sky. Across the islands warmth quietly returned to the earth.
Creation breathed once again.
And for countless generations afterward, whenever dawn arrived after a long night, people remembered the story of the cave, the story of the dance,
the laughter, the mirror,
and the quiet reminder that sometimes the light we search for has simply forgotten how brightly it already shines.
With the return of the sun, the heavens slowly settled into peace once again. Morning arrived as it always had.
The forests welcomed the first light filtering through their leaves. Mist drifted gently above quiet rivers. The sea reflected a sky no longer hidden by endless twilight.
For a time balance returned.
Yet among the three great children of Izanagi, one still wandered without purpose.
Susanoo,
the Kami of storms,
the sea,
and wild winds.
His story had not ended with the cave.
In many ways it had only just begun.
Unlike Amaterasu, who represented steady light, or Yomi, who quietly watched over the moonlit night, Susanoo remained unpredictable.
Storms rarely ask permission before arriving. The sea does not always remain calm. Strong winds reshape forests without warning. The ancient Japanese understood these forces well. Living upon islands surrounded by powerful oceans, they respected nature's beauty, but they also respected its strength. Susanoo became the spirit of that strength, not cruel, not evil, simply impossible to control completely. According to the ancient stories, his actions within the heavens could no longer be ignored.
The disturbance surrounding Amaterasu's retreat had left lasting consequences.
The heavenly Kami eventually reached a difficult decision. Susanoo would leave the heavenly realm. Some describe this as exile, others simply say he was sent away.
Whatever the exact meaning, his journey would now continue upon the earth below. Imagine descending from the heavens for the very first time.
Clouds slowly drifting beneath your feet, mountains rising closer with every passing moment, forests stretching endlessly toward distant horizons, rivers shining like silver threads beneath the morning sun. The world that Izanagi and Izanami had once created now lay waiting below. Susanoo arrived in the land known today as Izumo.
Even now, Izumo holds a special place within Japanese mythology.
Ancient shrines stand quietly among forests. Old traditions remain carefully preserved. For centuries, people believed countless Kami gathered there each year. Perhaps because so many old stories seem to find their way back to this peaceful region. As Susanoo wandered across the countryside, he noticed something unusual. A family sat beside a quiet river. They were weeping, not loudly,
not dramatically, simply the quiet tears of people who had carried sorrow for a very long time. An elderly man,
an elderly woman, and beside them a young daughter, the only child they still had. Susanoo approached gently. He asked why such sadness had settled upon a place so beautiful.
The old couple slowly explained.
Long ago they had 8 daughters. Each year something terrible came from the nearby mountains. A great serpent. Its name **Yamata no. Orochi ***. Every year the serpent demanded 1 daughter. Every year another child disappeared. 7 years had already passed. 7 daughters were gone. Only 1 remained.
Her name was ***.
Soon the serpent would return.
The old couple had no army,
no fortress, no place to hide, only time, and very little of it remained. The ancient texts describe Yamata no Orochi in extraordinary language. 8 heads,
8 tails,
eyes glowing red like winter cherries. Its body stretched across valleys and mountains. Trees and moss grew upon its enormous back. Cypress and cedar forests covered its scales. Its belly was stained red, like earth rich with iron. Modern readers often imagine dragons when hearing this description.
Yet Orochi feels older than that.
Less like a flying creature and more like part of the landscape itself. A living mountain.
A force of nature. Some historians believe the myth may have been inspired by rivers.
Large rivers often split into many channels. Flooding repeatedly destroyed villages. To ancient people, such overwhelming natural power might easily become an enormous serpent. Whether the story describes a creature or a memory of nature itself, no one can truly know. Perhaps it has always been both.
Susanoo listened quietly. Unlike earlier stories, he did not immediately draw his sword. Instead, he thought.
The myths often surprise us this way. Strength alone rarely solves every problem. Sometimes wisdom arrives first. Susanoo made the old couple an offer. If he could save Kushan, would they allow her to become his wife? The grieving parents agreed immediately. Hope had finally appeared where none had existed before. According to the ancient story, Susanoo first transformed Kushan into a small comb.
He gently placed her within his hair, safe,
protected, always beside him. The image is wonderfully symbolic. Earlier comb had illuminated Yomi.
Now another comb quietly protected someone precious.
Simple objects continue carrying remarkable meaning throughout Japanese mythology. Next, Susanoo prepared for the serpent's arrival. Not by building walls, not by gathering soldiers.
Instead, he instructed the old couple to prepare sake.
Large quantities of it, 8 enormous vats, 1 for each head of Orochi. The sake was carefully brewed,
rich,
fragrant, strong enough that its aroma drifted through the surrounding valleys. Nearby 8 wooden gates were constructed. Behind each gate rested 1 great vat.
Everything became quiet once more. The preparations finished.
The waiting began. Days passed.
The mountains remained peaceful.
The forests whispered gently whenever the wind passed through them. The river continued flowing toward the sea. Then one morning the birds suddenly fell silent. Even before anyone saw the serpent, the forest itself seemed to notice. Branches trembled. The earth grew faintly still. Far away, something enormous slowly approached. The first head appeared beyond the trees.
Then another,
until all 8 rose above the forest. The serpent's immense body wound through the valleys like a living mountain range. Its scales disappeared beneath moss. Ancient trees grew from its back. Mist clung to its enormous form.
It did not rush.
Creatures that large never need to. The scent of the sake drifted through the air. The serpent paused. 1 head slowly lowered.
Then another.
Soon each of the 8 heads discovered one of the waiting vats. The ancient story tells us that Orochi began drinking.
Slowly, greedily, without suspicion.
The valley became strangely peaceful once more.
No battle yet.
Only the quiet sound of an ancient creature drinking beside the river. Little by little the sake began taking effect. The enormous heads grew heavy, their movement slowed.
The great serpent which had terrified the valley for so many years gradually surrendered to sleep. Deep,
dreamless,
peaceful sleep. And standing quietly nearby, Susanoo rested 1 hand upon the hilt of his sword.
Knowing that the moment the serpent closed all 8 of its eyes, one of Japan's most famous legends would finally begin.